Under the fractured moon, a silver chain whispered secrets to the wind, binding the fragile to the forgotten. Ilara's breath hung in the frigid air like a ghost unwilling to depart, each exhale a fragile thread weaving through the iron bars of her prison cell. The tower of Blackthorn Keep loomed around her, its stones etched with the scars of ancient wars, now guardians of her exile. She had been Omega once, cherished in the whispers of her pack for her quiet strength, her ability to soothe the wild hearts of alphas with a touch. But that was before the betrayal, before her mate, the once noble Beta who had risen too swiftly, accused her of treason to claim her place at the alpha's side. Lies, woven from envy and ambition, had stripped her of everything, her home, her honor, her freedom. The wind howled outside, carrying the distant ewives of wolves patrolling the frozen borders of the kingdom. Snowflakes danced against the narrow window slit, painting the world beyond in strokes of white and shadow. Ilara pressed her palm to the cold iron, feeling the pulse of the lunar medallion hidden beneath her tattered shift. It was her mother's gift, a silver crescent moon cradled in obsidian, etched with runes that glowed faintly under the night sky. The chain around her neck had grown heavy these past moons, a constant reminder of the Deus's indifferent gaze. "It will guide you when the pack turns away," her mother had said, her voice a melody lost to fever and famine. Now it was all Ilara had left, a symbol of what she might have been, if fate had not deemed her fragile. The cell was a tomb of silence, broken only by the drip of melting ice from the eaves above. Her body ached from the chains that bound her wrists during the day, released only at night, when the guards deemed her too weak to flee. They were not wrong. Hunger gnawed at her insides, a beast more relentless than any wolf, and the chill seeped into her bones like accusation. She had been locked away for weeks, awaiting the Alpha's judgment, a public execution under the full moon, they said, to purge the pack of her curse. But Ilara knew the truth. She was no traitor. The whispers in the shadows had reached her even here, carried on the breath of a sympathetic servant. The real poison flowed from within, from alliances forged in secret with the rival kingdom of Frostvale, where an Alpha King hungered for Blackthorn's lands. She sank to the straw-strewn floor, the medallion cool against her skin, its weight an anchor in the storm of her thoughts. What is strength, if not enduring the silence of those who once vowed protection? The Deusa had marked her as Omega, born to heal and bind. Yet here she rotted, her gifts dormant, her spirit fraying like the hem of her gown. Memories flooded her, the warmth of pack fires, the rhythmic chants under starlit skies, the way her touch could mend a warrior's wound with threads of moonlight. Now, those same hands trembled, chapped and bloodied from futile scratches at the door. A distant horn blared, piercing the night like a blade. Ilara lifted her head, heart quickening. Footsteps echoed in the corridor, heavy, purposeful, not the lazy shuffle of guards. The door groaned open, spilling torchlight into the gloom. There stood Thorn, the pack's enforcer, his broad frame silhouetted against the flickering flames. His eyes, steel-grey and unyielding, met hers without pity. "The Alpha summons you," he growled. His voice rough as gravel under boots. No explanation, no gentleness. He unchained her wrists, the metal clinking like shattered promises, and hauled her to her feet. The descent from the tower was a blur of stone steps slick with frost, the wind whipping through arrow slits to claw at her skin. Ilara's bare feet bled on the icy flags, each step a testament to her fragility. Yet she held her head high, the medallion swaying like a pendulum of defiance. They emerged into the great hall, where the pack gathered under banners of wolf and thorn, their faces a sea of suspicion and scorn. At the head, Alpha Garrick sat upon his throne of carved oak and iron, his once majestic form bloated with ale and arrogance. Beside him, her former mate, now elevated to his council, smirked with the satisfaction of a victor. "Ilara of the Silver Glade," Garrick intoned, his voice booming like thunder over the peaks. "You stand accused of conspiring with our enemies, of weakening the blood of Blackthorn." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, laced with the scent of fear and bloodlust. She met his gaze, searching for the leader she had once admired, but found only hollow ambition. The medallion burned against her chest, a subtle warmth that no one else could feel, a whisper from the Deucer, perhaps, urging her to speak. "I conspired with no one," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. "The shadows you fear are your own." Gasps echoed, but Garrick's laugh cut them short, cold as the snowdrifts outside. "Then prove your loyalty, or die as the traitor you are." He rose, gesturing to the doors. "The Frostvale dogs encroach upon our borders. You will go to their camp alone, under truce flag, and demand their surrender. Return with treaty or head. Fail, and your corpse will feed the ravens." The hall fell silent, the weight of his words settling like fresh snow. Exile, not death, but a suicide mission cloaked in honor. Thorn shoved a white banner into her hands, its fabric rough and unyielding. No cloak, no weapon, only her fragility and the medallion's hidden light. As they dragged her toward the gates, the moon broke through the clouds, bathing the courtyard in silver. The wind carried eaves from the mountains, a chorus of warning and wildness. Ilara stepped into the night, the banner fluttering like a fragile wing. The path to the enemy camp wound through pine-shrouded valleys, where the air tasted of pine resin and impending storm. Her feet sank into the snow, each step a prayer to the Deusa for strength she did not possess. The medallion pulsed, a beacon in the dark, guiding her toward an unknown fate. Behind her, Blackthorn faded into shadow. Ahead, the fires of Frostvale flickered like distant stars, promising revelation or ruin. As the first flakes of a new blizzard stung her cheeks, Ilara whispered to the wind, "If mercy is my curse, let it forge my path." The moon watched, silent witness to the Omega's solitary march into the heart of war. The snow fell thicker now, a relentless veil that blurred the line between earth and sky, as Ilara trudged onward through the shadowed valley. Her bare feet, numb and raw, left faint imprints in the drifts, fragile marks that the wind erased almost as soon as they formed. The white banner hung limp in her grasp, sodden and heavy, its truce promise mocking her solitude. The lunar medallion at her throat swayed with each labored step, its obsidian edges catching glints of moonlight like captured stars, a quiet pulse against her skin that spoke of hidden fires beneath the frost. The path twisted upward, flanked by ancient pines whose branches groaned under the weight of ice, their needles whispering secrets to the gale. Distant howls pierced the night, not the triumphant cries of Blackthorn's wolves, but something deeper, laced with sorrow, a chorus from the enemy lines perhaps, mourning losses yet to come. Ilara's breath came in shallow gasps, the cold clawing at her lungs, but she pressed on, driven by the Alpha's cruel decree. Surrender or death, the words echoed in her mind like a curse, yet beneath them stirred a flicker of defiance. What was one more rejection in a life built on them? The Deusa had forged her as Omega, healer of wounds unseen, but tonight she was merely a pawn, sent to beg or bleed. As the valley crested, the enemy camp emerged from the storm like a beast rousing from slumber. Tents of oiled hide and iron stakes huddled against the mountainside, ringed by watchfires that spat defiant sparks into the dark. Sentries patrolled the perimeter, their armored forms silhouetted against the flames, eyes gleaming with the feral hunger of Frostvale's warriors. The air thickened with the scent of smoke and pine, undercut by the metallic tang of blood, fresh from some skirmish earlier that eve. Ilara's heart hammered, a wild rhythm against her ribs as she raised the banner higher, its fabric snapping in the wind like a plea unspoken. "Halt, wanderer!" A voice boomed from the shadows, rough as grinding stone. A patrol of 3 emerged, axes glinting under torchlight, their faces scarred and weathered by endless winters. The leader, a burly beta with a braided beard frosted white, leveled his weapon at her throat. "Speak your purpose, or taste Frostvale's steel." Ilara swallowed the fear rising like bile, her voice emerging steady, threaded with the quiet authority of one who had nothing left to lose. "I come from Blackthorn under truce. I bear their demand for your king's surrender." The words tasted of ash, but she held the banner firm, the medallion warming faintly, as if drawing strength from the moon's indifferent gaze. The warriors exchanged glances, murmurs rippling among them like wind through reeds. The leader's eyes narrowed, tracing her frail form, the tattered shift clinging to her like a shroud, the bloodied feet staining the snow pink. "An Omega? Alone? Garrick sends a lamb to the wolves?" Laughter barked from his companions, harsh and hollow, but he waved them silent. "The king will see you. Move." They bound her wrists loosely with coarse rope, more precaution than cruelty, and marched her through the camp. Eyes followed from every tent flap, curious, wary, some softening at the sight of her evident suffering. The ground sloped toward the heart of the encampment, where a grand pavilion rose, its peaks adorned with frost-rimed banners of silver wolf and jagged crown. Guards parted at the entrance, and the leader shoved her inside, the flap falling shut behind her like a sealed fate. The interior was a realm of contrasts, furs piled thick on the earthen floor for warmth, a central brazier crackling with logs that cast dancing shadows on walls hung with maps and trophies of bone. At its center sat the Alpha King of Frostvale, his form imposing even in repose. King Draven leaned against a throne of carved antler and iron, his broad shoulders draped in a cloak of midnight fur, edged with silver thread that caught the firelight. But it was his eyes that seized her, storm grey, shadowed by an ancient weariness, framed by a face marked by a jagged scar running from temple to jaw, silvered with age. Blood stained the wrappings on his left arm, fresh and dark, seeping through the bandages. He favoured it subtly, a warrior's pride masking the wound's bite. He did not rise as she entered, but his gaze lifted slowly, pinning her with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. The connection struck like lightning, instinctive, unbidden, a pull deep in her core, as if the Deucer had woven their threads long before this night. Ilara's breath caught, her Omega senses awakening to the raw power of him, the scent of pine and iron and something broken beneath. Yet fear coiled tight within her, rationalizing it away. He was the enemy, the conqueror her pack despised. Curiosity flickered too, warring with dread. Why did his presence stir the medallion to life, its runes glowing softly against her chest? "You are no emissary," Draven said at last. His voice a low rumble, resonant as distant thunder over the peaks. He studied her, not with the lustful greed of lesser alphas, but with a melancholic scrutiny, as if seeing through her fragility to the steel it concealed. "Garrick sends a woman unbroken by chains? What game is this?" Ilara met his stare, the rope biting into her wrists a distant ache. "No game, my king, only desperation. Blackthorn demands your surrender, or war under the next moon." The words felt hollow, her body trembling not just from cold, but from the proximity of him, the heat radiating from his form, clashing with the chill in her veins. He rose then, slowly, towering over her, the wound pulling a faint grimace across his features. Up close, the scar told tales of battles lost and won, of guilt etched deeper than blade could cut. "Surrender?" A bitter smile ghosted his lips, shadowed by the fire's glow. "From one who has already lost too much." His eyes flicked to the medallion, lingering as if recognizing its lunar call. A spark of something unspoken passing between them, denied yet undeniable. The air thickened, charged with unspoken questions, the brazier's flames leaping as if feeding on their tension. Ilara's pulse raced, fear and curiosity entwining like vines, pulling her toward this wounded king, even as her mind screamed retreat. What strength was this, if not the mercy to see redemption in an enemy's gaze? Outside, the storm howled louder, wolves answering in kind, as the fragile Omega stood on the precipice of fate's cruel jest. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The flames in the brazier leaped higher, casting erratic shadows that danced across King Draven's scarred face, illuminating the weariness etched into every line. Ilara stood frozen under his gaze, the coarse rope around her wrists a tether to her fragile reality, while the lunar medallion pulsed warmer against her skin, as if the moon itself urged her to bridge the chasm between them. The air in the pavilion hung heavy with the scent of burning pine and the faint, coppery undercurrent of his bloodied bandage, a reminder that even kings bled like mortals under the Deuce's watchful eye. Draven's hand rose slowly, not in threat, but in a gesture that commanded silence from the guards flanking the entrance. "Untie her," he ordered, his voice a gravelly murmur that brooked no dissent. The leader of the patrol hesitated, axe still half raised, but a sharp glance from the king quelled him. The ropes fell away, leaving red welts on Ilara's skin that stung like accusations. She rubbed her wrists, the sudden freedom feeling more like vulnerability, her eyes never leaving his. There was no triumph in his posture, only a quiet assessment, as if he saw the fractures in her soul mirroring his own. "You speak of war as if it's a stranger to me," Draven said, stepping closer, the fur of his cloak brushing the edge of the furs at her feet. His wound pulled taut with the movement, a hiss escaping through clenched teeth, but he masked it with the stoicism of one who had borne worse. Garrick's ambition blinds him to the true shadows encroaching on these lands, not my Frostvale wolves, but the rot within his own pack, the whispers of betrayal that reach even here. His eyes darkened, storm clouds gathering, and Ilara felt the pull again, that instinctive thread drawing her Omega essence toward his alpha core, wounded and wild. She wanted to retreat, to rationalize this as survival's illusion, a trick of the cold seeping into her mind. He was the enemy. The king whose banners had clashed with blackthorns in bloody skirmishes under countless moons, yet curiosity bloomed unbidden, softening the edges of her fear. "If not your surrender, then what do you seek?" she whispered, her voice threading through the crackle of the fire. The medallion's runes glowed faintly, visible now in the dim light, drawing his gaze downward. He reached out, hesitating, his fingers hovering near her throat, before withdrawing, as if burned by the proximity. Before he could answer, a horn wailed outside, sharp, urgent, slicing through the storm's roar. Shouts erupted from the camp, followed by the clash of steel and the guttural snarls of wolves in frenzy. Draven's head snapped toward the flap, his body coiling like a predator roused. "Intruders," he growled, snatching a broadsword from its stand beside the throne, the blade whispering free with a sound like ice cracking. "Not ours. Garrick's scouts, testing the truce you bear." Ilara's heart seized, the pavilion's warmth suddenly suffocating. The common enemy, her own pack's desperation manifesting as betrayal, striking under the cover of blizzard to assassinate the king and shatter the fragile peace. She should rejoice, whisper directions to aid them, but the thought curdled in her gut. Draven's scar, his quiet guilt, the way his eyes had lingered on her medallion, it stirred something deeper, her empathy born of shared exile. He had not mocked her frailty. Instead, he had seen the hidden strength, the healer beneath the chains. "Stay here," he commanded, turning toward the entrance, but Ilara moved without thought, her bare feet silent on the furs. "No," she said, the word escaping like a breath of wind. "They know the terrain. You'll need eyes that see beyond the blades." Her voice trembled, but resolve hardened it, the Deusa's gift stirring faintly, a whisper of intuition that mapped the shadows. Draven paused, surprise flickering in his grey eyes, then nodded once, a pact forged in the fire's glow. They burst into the storm together, the wind whipping snow into a blinding fury that stung like needles. The camp was chaos. Frostvale warriors grappling with Blackthorn infiltrators cloaked in white, their forms blurring in the whiteout. Ubis rent the air, a symphony of rage and pain, as blood sprayed dark against the drifts. Draven charged forward, sword arcing in a silver blur, felling a masked assailant with a roar that echoed off the mountains. Ilara followed, her medallion flaring hot, guiding her through the melee. She dodged a swinging axe, her Omega senses heightening, the scent of pine masking an ambush to the left. "There!" she cried, pointing into the swirling snow. Draven pivoted, his blade meeting the hidden foe's thrust, iron clanging like thunder. The infiltrator fell, but not before grazing Draven's shoulder, fresh blood blooming on his cloak. Pain flashed across his face, but he pressed on, shielding her from a second attacker who lunged from the shadows. Ilara's hands moved instinctively, pressing against the new wound as he staggered, her touch channeling a thread of moonlight warmth that eased the burn. It was no full healing, her gifts dormant from disuse and despair, but enough to steady him, their eyes locking in the midst of battle, a bond sparking amid the blood and frost. The skirmish ebbed as Frostvale reinforcements overwhelmed the scouts, bodies littering the snow like fallen petals in a rose frozen mid-bloom. Draven leaned on his sword, breath ragged, the storm subsiding to a mournful howl. He turned to her, blood trickling from his lip, mingling with the flakes on his beard. "You fought for me," he said, not accusation, but wonder, laced with melancholy. An Omega of Blackthorn, saving the king she came to break. Ilara's chest heaved, the medallion cooling against her sweat-damp skin, its light fading like a secret shared. Fear still lingered, rationalizing the act as mere survival, protect the truce-bearer to return alive. But deeper, empathy bloomed into something irrevocable, a vincula woven from mutual wounds. His guilt mirrored her rejection, two souls marked by betrayal, finding refuge in the other's unyielding gaze. What is strength, if not choosing alliance over the chains of old loyalties? The moon emerged briefly, silvering the bloodied snow, as if the Deusa approved this fragile sanctuary. Yet doubt gnawed at her edges. Could mercy bind what war had torn? Draven extended a hand, calloused and steady, offering not conquest, but companionship in the cold. Ilara hesitated, the wind carrying distant yives of pursuit, a reminder that refuge was fleeting and bonds forged in blood demanded a price. The snow settled like a shroud over the fallen, muting the echoes of battle into a hush broken only by the ragged cadence of breaths and the distant fading howls that mourned the dead. Ilara knelt beside King Draven in the crimson-streaked drifts, her hands still pressed to his shoulder where the blade had bitten deep. The metallic tang of blood mingled with the crisp bite of frost, invading her senses as the lunar medallion burned against her chest, its runes now a vivid silver glow that pierced the storm's veil. She had meant only to steady him, a fleeting instinct born of survival's cruel logic. But as her palms warmed with an inner light, threads of moonlight weaving from her fingertips, the wound began to knit, flesh mending under her touch like frost yielding to dawn. Draven's storm-grey eyes widened, locking onto hers with a ferocity that stripped away the barriers of king and captive. Pain twisted his features, but not from the gash. It was recognition, raw and unbidden, dawning like the moon, cresting a blackened peak. He grasped her wrist gently, his calloused fingers rough against her chilled skin, halting the flow of her gift, yet savouring its echo. The air between them hummed, charged with the Deuce's whisper, the wind swirling eddies of snow around their forms, as if the night itself conspired to bind them. Ilara's heart thundered, fear coiling anew, not of him, but of this awakening within her. A power long dormant, starved by rejection and chains. Her Omega essence, once a balm for pack wounds, now surged unchecked, revealing visions in the medallion's glow, flashes of shadowed thrones, a crown fractured by betrayal, and a silver path through endless winter leading to his side. "You," Draven murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her bones, laced with the melancholy of one who had long borne solitude's weight. He released her wrist, but his gaze held her captive, searching the depths of her eyes as if reading runes etched on her soul. The scar along his jaw gleamed silver in the moonlight, a map of old guilts, betrayals from his own council, a queen lost to poison under his unwitting reign, the curse of endless war that had hollowed Frostvale's heart. The seers spoke of a light-bearer, an Omega marked by the crescent, who would unravel the veil of my fate. Not a weapon, but a key to the shadows that haunt my bloodline. His breath clouded the air, warm against the cold, carrying the scent of pine and iron, stirring her instincts to heal not just flesh, but the fractures of spirit. Ilara pulled back, the medallion cooling as the vision faded, leaving her trembling in the snow's embrace. The glow had shown her his truth, a prophecy whispered in Frostvale's ancient temples, of a fragile one from enemy lands who would reveal the traitor in his midst. The same rot that festered in Blackthorn, a shared poison spun by ambitious shadows seeking to topple both kings for their own ascent. Her gift, the Pathfinder's sight, had lain hidden, suppressed by Garrick's accusations, dismissed as weakness. Now it bloomed visceral and undeniable, the warmth spreading through her veins like fire under ice, illuminating the bond that defied borders and blood oaths. Yet denial clawed at her. This was no romance of tales, but a dangerous revelation, pulling her from exile into the heart of destinies entwined. What is destiny, if not the cruel unveiling of gifts meant to mend what rejection has shattered? Draven rose unsteadily, offering his uninjured hand once more. The gesture weighted with the gravity of kings who rarely knelt to fate. Around them, Frostvale warriors gathered, their torches sputtering in the wind, casting pricks of gold against the white expanse. Blood pooled in shallow hollows, steaming faintly before freezing, a stark reminder of the night's toll. One warrior, a lithe scout with eyes like polished obsidian, stepped forward, bowing low. "My king, the intruders bore Blackthorn's thorn mark, but their scents, tainted, like the whispers from the eastern spies." Draven nodded, his free hand clenching the hilt of his sword, the blade still slick with the enemy's life. But his attention remained on Ilara, the melancholy in his gaze softening to something akin to reverence, a quiet acceptance of the pull that had sparked in the pavilion and now ignited fully. She took his hand, the contact sending a shiver through her, not of cold, but of the profound ache of connection, empathy transforming into a tether that resisted all rationale. His skin was fever-hot against hers, the pulse of his alpha strength syncing with her omega calm, a harmony born of mutual wounds. The medallion swayed between them, its chain a silver thread linking their fates as the moon climbed higher, bathing the camp in ethereal light. Distant uaves rose again, not in rage but in wary accord, as if the wolves sensed the shift, the fragile Omega no longer a pawn, but the bearer of revelations that could redeem or ruin. Yet as they turned toward the pavilion, the weight of what she had unleashed settled like fresh snow on her shoulders. Her gift had marked her as more than survivor. It painted her as the fulcrum of war's turning, the one who could expose the true betrayer weaving treachery across kingdoms. Draven's glance over his shoulder carried a silent plea, his guilt-laden eyes reflecting the fire within her. Could she embrace this role, heal the king who saw her worth when her own pack had cast her aside? The wind whispered through the pines, carrying the scent of impending dawn, but the night held its breath, poised on the edge of choice. Mercy had crowned her fragile steps thus far, but revelation demanded sacrifice. Would she forge the path, or let the shadows claim them both? In the silence that followed, Ilara felt the Deuce's gaze upon her, unyielding as the stars, urging her toward the moral precipice where love and destiny collided in blood and light. Comment Luna if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your worth. The pavilion's heavy flap billowed like a wounded beast as the first grey light of dawn clawed at the horizon, filtering through the storm's thinning veil. Ilara stood at its threshold, the lunar medallion heavy against her chest, its silver glow now a subdued ember that mirrored the turmoil churning within her. King Draven's hand lingered near hers, a ghost of warmth in the encroaching chill, but she drew back, the revelation of her gift, a pathfinder's sight that pierced veils of deceit, still echoing in her veins like the aftershock of thunder. The camp stirred around them, Frostvale warriors dragging the fallen into shallow graves dug by wind-scoured hands, their breaths pluming in silent oaths of vengeance. Blood stained the snow in dark, irregular patterns, freezing into crimson crystals that caught the weak light, symbols of the night's fragile truce, now teetering on betrayal's edge. Draven's voice cut through the hush, low and resolute, pulling her from the whirlwind of visions. The traitor moves in shadows, Ilara. Your sight has shown me fragments. A figure cloaked in blackthorn's thorns, whispering to my own counsel, weaving a web that spans our borders. His scar twisted with the words, the ancient wound a testament to guilts he carried like chains, heavier than any iron. Melancholy shadowed his grey eyes, the weight of a king who had lost a queen to such poison, her death a spectre that haunted Frostvale's halls. He had been ethical once, a ruler bound by duty to protect his pack from the wars his ambition had unwittingly fueled, but rejection from within had fractured him, leaving a hollow where trust should reign. Now her presence, fragile yet unyielding, stirred the embers of redemption, a pull he resisted with the stoicism of one scarred by too many dawns. Ilara's breath caught, the medallion pulsing in rhythm with her racing heart. The visions had flooded her unbidden. Garrick's bloated throne, her former mate's smirking face twisted in avarice, and a hooded silhouette bridging the kingdoms, promising power to the highest bidder. The true betrayer was no distant rival, but a serpent coiled in Blackthorn's heart, her accuser, the beta who had risen on her downfall, now allying with a Frostvale dissident to ignite all-out war. Her pack, once her sanctuary, loomed in her mind's eye as a cage of suspicion, their howls a chorus of rejection that still echoed in her bones. Freedom whispered to her, a siren's call to flee this entanglement, to vanish into the mountains where no oaths bound her. Yet love's insidious thread, born of empathy for Draven's quiet suffering, tugged harder, demanding she confront the past that had forged her exile. A horn blared from the east, sharp and defiant, shattering the dawn's fragile peace. Shouts erupted across the camp, warriors scrambling to their posts as the ground trembled with the thunder of approaching hooves. Draven's hand found his sword, the blade singing free once more, but Ilara's gift flared anew, mapping the assault in flashes. Blackthorn's main force, led by Garrick himself, charging under banners of wolf and thorn, their eyes burning with the fervour of a pack scorned. Not scouts this time, but the full might of her former home, come to reclaim their traitor, or raise Frostvale to ash. The wind carried their war cries, laced with the scent of pine resin and steel, whipping snow into a frenzy that blurred friend from foe. "They come for me," Ilara whispered, horror coiling in her gut like icy fingers. The medallion burned hot, illuminating the moral chasm yawning before her. Forgive the pact that had cast her aside, broker peace through revelation, or embrace war's fury to sever the ties that bound her. Draven turned to her, his presence a bulwark against the storm, the guilt in his eyes softening to a fierce protectiveness. "Then we face them together," he said, his voice a rumble that steadied her trembling form. "Your sight is the weapon they fear most, the truth that unmasks their rot." The clash erupted at the camp's edge, a visceral symphony of snarls and steel under the paling moon. Ilara followed Draven into the fray, her bare feet crunching through bloodied snow, the cold no longer a torment, but a sharpening clarity. Frostvale warriors formed a ragged line, their axes gleaming like fangs, while Blackthorn's horde poured from the tree line, familiar faces twisted in rage, their pelts matted with frost and anticipation. Garrick rode at the fore, his once noble frame astride a massive grey stallion, his eyes locking onto Ilara with predatory triumph. Beside him, her former mate, now beta enforcer, grinned with the malice of one who had bartered her life for ambition, his cloak bearing the subtle insignia of the traitor, a thorn entwined with a frost-rimed crown. "Traitor Omega!" Garrick bellowed, his voice booming over the din as his forces halted, a wall of fur and iron. "You bed with the enemy, as we knew you would. Surrender, and your death will be swift." The pack's howls rose in unison, a wave of rejection that crashed against Ilara's spirit. Reopening wounds deeper than any blade, she stepped forward, the medallion flaring like a beacon, its light cutting through the swirling snow to reveal the beta's deceitful aura, a shadow of collusion that her gift laid bare. "No more lies," she cried, her voice rising clear and unyielding, threaded with the Deusa's quiet fire. The wind howled in approval, carrying her words to every ear. "The poison is yours, Garrick, your counsel's whispers to Frostvale's shadows, plotting to crown yourselves on our graves." Gasps rippled through the ranks, doubt flickering in the eyes of old packmates who had once shared her fireside. Her former mate lunged forward, sword drawn, but Draven intercepted, their blades clashing in a shower of sparks that lit the snow like falling stars. The king fought with melancholic precision, each strike a judgment on betrayal, his wound from the night before pulling a grimace, yet fueling his resolve. Ilara's hands trembled as she wove through the melee, her pathfinder sight guiding her to the heart of the confrontation. Garrick dismounted, towering over her, his breath hot with ale and fury. "You dare accuse me, fragile one. Your exile was mercy, your weakness a curse on Blackthorn." Up close, his eyes held no leader's fire, only the hollow greed of a rival alpha clinging to power. The medallion's glow intensified, projecting visions into the air like ethereal mist. Clandestine meetings under shadowed moons, the betas pact with the hooded traitor, gold exchanged for maps of both kingdoms' vulnerabilities. Murmurs turned to outrage among Blackthorn's ranks, warriors lowering weapons as truth pierced their loyalty. Garrick roared, swinging his axe, but Ilara did not flinch, her choice crystallized in that heartbeat. Not war's blind rage, but forgiveness's blade, tempered by love's quiet strength. She extended a hand, channeling her gift not to harm, but to illuminate, threads of moonlight binding the air between them. "Choose now," she said, voice steady as the mountains. Pardon for the pack you led astray, or freedom in exile as I once knew it. Draven felled her former mate with a decisive thrust, the body crumpling into the snow, blood pooling like spilled ink. Garrick hesitated, axe faltering, the weight of exposed guilt bowing his shoulders. The moon watched, silver and unyielding, as the packs held their breath, the wind whispering of paths untaken. Ilara's heart ached with the dilemma's sting, love for Draven pulling her toward union, yet the shadow of her past demanding she sever old chains, or risk them all in endless war. What is judgment, if not the mercy to forgive what rejection has wrought, even as it tests the soul's fragile core? The standoff hung suspended, blood and snow mingling under the dawn's reluctant gaze, as Ilara stood at the crossroads of redemption, her medallion a silent vow that destiny's price was paid in choices etched in light and loss. The dawn's pallid light bled across the snowfield, turning the crimson pools into veins of rose quartz that pulsed with the fading warmth of spilled lives. Ilara stood unbowed at the epicenter of the frozen tableau, her bare feet rooted in the blood-flecked drifts, the lunar medallion a searing talisman against her skin. Its glow waned to a soft luminescence, casting ethereal threads that lingered in the air like the last breaths of a dying star, illuminating the fractured faces of two packs locked in uneasy stasis. Garrick's axe trembled in his grip, the Alpha's once imposing form diminished under the weight of unveiled treachery, his eyes darting from the spectral visions to the warriors who now shifted their loyalties like shadows fleeing the sun. Draven flanked her, his sword lowered but ready, the fresh scars of battle etching deeper lines into his melancholic visage. His grey eyes fixed on her with a reverence that spoke of wounds healing not by blade, but by the quiet mercy she embodied. The wind, that eternal mourner, swept through the ranks, carrying the metallic tang of blood and the acrid bite of scorched pine from the camp's dying watchfires. Hooves echoed distantly from the tree line, a lament for the fallen, blackthorns betrayed and frost veils steadfast, mingling with the ragged symphony of breaths held in collective suspense. Ilara's heart thundered, a visceral drumbeat syncing with the medallion's pulse as the visions receded, leaving her hollowed yet resolute. The Pathfinder's gift had stripped away illusions, revealing the serpent's coil. Her former mate's corpse lay twisted in the snow. His ambition ended in a pool of his own deceit. But Garrick remained, the architect of her exile, his greed a mirror to the guilt Draven bore for wars past. Freedom tempted her still, a solitary path into the mountains, severing all bonds to reclaim a life untainted by pack or king. Yet the pull toward Draven, that instinctive tether forged in blood and revelation, demanded more, a union that could redeem kingdoms or a sacrifice that might shatter them anew. Garrick's laugh cracked the silence, brittle as fracturing ice, his voice laced with the desperation of a cornered wolf. Visions and whispers from a rejected Omega. You weave illusions to save your lover, but Blackthorn knows your curse. Fragile, unfit, a blight we cast out for good reason. His words lashed like thorns, reopening the raw edges of her rejection, the memories of chains and scorn flooding her senses. The tower's chill, the pack's averted eyes, the Deusa's silence amid her pleas. Around him, some warriors growled in echo, loyalty fraying but not fully severed, their sense thick with confusion and the feral urge for vengeance. Draven tensed, his hand brushing hers, a fleeting anchor of warmth amid the cold, his ethical core warring with the king's duty to strike down the threat. But he held, honoring her choice, his melancholy gaze a silent vow. He would not claim her through force, only through the shared redemption of mercy over might. Ilara stepped forward, the snow yielding softly under her weight, her tattered shift whispering against her legs like a forgotten prayer. The medallion flared once more, not in aggression, but in a radiant cascade that bathed Garrick in silver light, forcing him to confront the visions anew. His clandestine oaths, the gold-laced promises to Frostvale's dissidents, the lives bartered for a throne, built on lies. "Your strength was never in blades, Garrick," she said, her voice a cadenced melody rising above the wind's howl, intimate and unyielding, laced with the philosophy of one reborn from exile. "It was in leading us toward light, not shadows. I offer you what was denied me, exile without death, a chance to wander and atone, as the Deucer wills for the broken." Tears stung her eyes, not from fear, but from the ache of forgiveness's cost, to heal the pack that had wounded her deepest, risking Draven's fragile trust in the process. What is rebirth, if not the sacrifice of old hatreds to cradle new dawns? The Alpha's axe slipped from numb fingers, clattering into the snow with a muffled thud that reverberated like fate's verdict. His shoulders slumped, the arrogance crumbling into the hollow gaze of a man stripped bare, guilt etching fresh lines beside the scars of ambition. "Mercy from the fragile one," he muttered, voice hoarse with defeat, as murmurs swelled among Blackthorn's ranks, some snarling dissent, others bowing heads in dawning shame. Garrick raised his hands in surrender, the gesture a treaty forged not in ink, but in the bloodied snow between them. "Take your peace, Elara. Blackthorn yields to the truth you bear." Warriors parted, their howls shifting from rage to a subdued chorus of reluctant accord, the pack's scents mingling in wary truce as the dawn climbed higher, gilding the peaks in gold. Draven's hand found hers fully now, calloused fingers intertwining with her trembling ones, the contact a visceral spark that chased the chill from her bones. His eyes, storm-grey and softened by wonder, held hers in a gaze that transcended crowns and borders, the melancholy king marked by loss, finding in her the Omega born to heal his deepest wounds. No immediate blaze of passion, but a slow-burning union, rationalized through shared trials, accepted in the quiet strength of choice. The medallion cooled against her skin, its chain a symbol of bonds reforged, as the wind carried away the last echoes of conflict, leaving only the scent of pine and possibility. Elara turned from Garrick's retreating form, the packs dispersing like mist under the sun, her heart swelling with the Renacimiento's bittersweet fire. She had chosen union over solitude, compassion over war's endless cycle, her fragility transmuted into the realm's quiet sovereign. Draven drew her close, his cloak enveloping her against the lingering frost, their breaths mingling in a rhythm as ancient as the moon's pull. The Deucer's light lingered in the sky, a benediction on their path as they walked toward Frostvale's pavilion, two souls redeemed, the silver chain whispering of destinies woven from rejection's ashes. In the hush of morning, Elara felt the world's weight lift, her steps light on the snow. The fragile Omega returned not as prisoner, but as harbinger of peace. Her medallion a beacon that proved love's true proof, not a reward, but a flame kindled in the heart of suffering. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.